The gymnasium fell silent as two security guards approached Sarah Mitchell during her son's military academy graduation. She sat quietly in the third row, her worn nursing badge catching the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. The fabric of her simple blue dress, pressed carefully that morning, rustled softly as she straightened her posture. "Ma'am, we need you to step outside," the first guard announced, his voice carrying across the rows of families. "There's been a complaint about seating arrangements." Sarah's weathered hands remained folded in her lap. She had worked double shifts for 3 years to help pay for her son's education. The scent of floor wax and nervous anticipation filled the air as hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Camera phones lifted. Whispers started. She stood without protest, her dignity intact despite the burning in her chest. The metal of her son's baby bracelet, worn around her wrist for 18 years, felt cold against her skin. "If you believe no one should be treated this way, type honor below. Your voice matters more than you think." The second guard gestured toward the exit with impatience. "This section is reserved for academy families only." Sarah's son Tyler stood frozen on the graduation platform, his freshly pressed dress uniform suddenly feeling too tight. The Distinguished Service Medal pinned to his chest, earned through 2 tours overseas as a field medic, caught the light as his hands trembled slightly. He had specifically requested his mother sit in the third row, where she could see him receive his commission as a Navy officer. "I am an academy family," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the knot in her throat. She reached into her purse and withdrew a folded letter. "My son is graduating today." The guard barely glanced at the acceptance letter. "Ma'am, this is a formal event. There are dress codes." Around them, other families watched in uncomfortable silence. A woman in pearls and designer clothes whispered behind her program. A man in an expensive suit shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact. Their own sons and daughters stood on the platform, witnessing their classmates' mother being humiliated. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished gymnasium floor. Sarah's nursing shoes, practical, comfortable, the same ones she wore during 16-hour shifts at the VA hospital, squeaked softly against the waxed surface as the guards continued their escort toward the door. She had delivered countless babies, held dying veterans' hands, worked through hurricanes and pandemics. The smell of antiseptic still clung faintly to her clothes despite the shower she'd taken. Her badge read, "Sarah Mitchell, RN, 25 years of service," though none of the families around her bothered to notice. Tyler watched helplessly as his mother was led away. This was the woman who had sold her grandmother's wedding ring to buy his textbooks, who had worked Christmas shifts so he could afford the academy's entrance exam fees, who had never missed a parent-teacher conference, even when she was bone-tired from caring for wounded soldiers at the hospital. The gymnasium's air conditioning hummed quietly overhead, but the atmosphere had grown thick with tension. Other graduating cadets looked at Tyler with mixture of sympathy and relief that it wasn't their own families being scrutinized. Sarah passed a display case filled with military honors and photographs of distinguished graduates. Her reflection caught briefly in the glass. A middle-aged woman whose sacrifices had never required recognition, whose love had always been measured in actions rather than words. The guards opened the heavy doors leading to the corridor. The sound echoed through the gymnasium like a judgment. Sarah Mitchell, who had spent her career serving others, was being removed from her son's proudest moment because someone decided she didn't belong. She walked through those doors with her head high, carrying the same quiet strength that had sustained her through years of night shifts and sacrifice. In the hallway, the humiliation deepened. The guards positioned Sarah beside a janitor's closet, the smell of cleaning chemicals mixing with the stale air of the corridor. Through the gymnasium's windows, she could see other families adjusting their seats, filling the empty space where she had been. "You can watch from here," the first guard said, pointing to a narrow window in the gymnasium door. The glass was scratched and smudged, barely offering a view of the ceremony platform. Sarah pressed her face close to the cold glass. Inside, Tyler stood at attention with his class, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing toward where she had been sitting. The scratched window distorted her view, making everything appear broken and fragmented. A family walking past stared openly at her. The mother clutched her purse tighter and whispered something to her husband. Their teenage daughter pulled out her phone, angling it towards Sarah with a smirk. The flash went off silently. "Doesn't look like she belongs here anyway," someone muttered from behind a program. The ceremony continued without her. Sarah watched through the damaged glass as other mothers dabbed tears from their eyes when their sons received their commissions. She had dreamed of this moment for 3 years, seeing Tyler receive his gold bars, officially becoming Lieutenant Mitchell. Instead, she was pressed against a door like an unwelcome observer at her own son's triumph. The sound of applause filtered through the walls, muffled and distant. Each wave of clapping felt like another reminder of her exclusion. The cold concrete floor beneath her feet seemed to pull the warmth from her body through her practical nursing shoes. A group of academy wives walked past, their heels clicking against the polished floor. Their conversation stopped when they saw Sarah, then resumed in hushed tones punctuated by disapproving glances. One of them took a photo before they rounded the corner, probably for their social media groups. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the scratched glass. A woman who had spent her life healing others, now treated like a problem to be hidden away. The metal of her son's baby bracelet seemed to burn against her wrist as she gripped it for strength. Inside the gymnasium, she could see Tyler searching the crowd, looking for her face among the sea of families. His confusion was visible even through the distorted window. This should have been their moment together, the culmination of everything they had worked for. The guards remained nearby, arms crossed, ensuring she stayed in her assigned spot beside the janitor's closet. The fluorescent light above flickered occasionally, casting harsh shadows across her face. The dignity she had maintained began to feel heavy, like armor that was slowly crushing her spirit. But Sarah Mitchell did not cry. She did not protest. She simply stood there, watching her son's graduation through scratched glass, carrying her pain with the same quiet strength that had defined her entire life. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small American flag, the same one that had draped her late husband's coffin 8 years ago. Staff Sergeant David Mitchell had died serving his country in Afghanistan, leaving behind a wife and a 12-year-old son who would grow up to follow in his father's footsteps. She unfolded the flag slowly, the fabric soft from years of careful handling. The red, white, and blue had faded slightly, but the care with which she held it was unmistakable. This flag had been with her through every important moment since David's death. Tyler's high school graduation, his acceptance to the academy, every milestone they had navigated together. The guards didn't notice her quiet action. They were busy checking their phones, occasionally glancing through the gymnasium doors to ensure she stayed put. The harsh fluorescent light overhead cast sharp shadows as she pressed the flag gently against her chest, over her heart. Through the scratched window, she could see the ceremony reaching its climax. Officers were beginning to pin the new lieutenant's gold bars on their uniforms. Tyler would be called soon. The fabric of the flag felt warm against her palm, despite the cold concrete walls surrounding her. Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment, feeling the weight of the flag and everything it represented, her husband's sacrifice, her son's dedication, her own years of service to veterans who came through the hospital doors broken and needing care. The flag had been present for all of it, a silent witness to their family's commitment to serving others. She opened her eyes and looked through the distorted glass again. Tyler was stepping forward now, approaching the commanding officer who would officially commission him. The moment she had worked 3 jobs to make possible was happening, and she was watching it through a janitor's window, holding her husband's flag like a prayer. The guards' radios crackled quietly with routine security chatter. Other families continued to pass by in the hallway, some glancing at her with curiosity, others pretending not to see. None of them understood the significance of the faded flag she held, or the quiet strength required to stand there with dignity intact. Sarah Mitchell folded the flag back into her purse, the motion practiced and reverent. She had honored her husband's memory and her son's achievement in the only way she could from this hallway exile. The gesture was invisible to everyone around her, but it connected her to the ceremony beyond the walls, beyond the guards, beyond the humiliation. She stood a little straighter, drawing strength from the flag's presence and the legacy it carried. The gymnasium doors burst open with sudden force. 10 figures in dress blues moved through the entrance with the precision of a military formation, their polished shoes striking the floor in perfect unison. The sound cut through the ceremony like a blade, causing heads to turn throughout the audience. They were Navy SEALs, their trident pins gleaming on their chests, their bearing unmistakable. The senior chief, a man whose weathered face spoke of decades in service, led them directly toward the hallway where Sarah stood. The 2 security guards straightened, suddenly aware that the dynamic had shifted completely. "Ma'am," the senior chief said, stopping in front of Sarah with military precision. His voice was quiet, but carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Senior Chief Petty Officer Williams, I believe there's been a mistake." Sarah looked up at him, still holding her purse with its hidden flag. The SEALs formed a respectful semicircle around her, their presence transforming the cold hallway into something that felt like sacred ground. "Your son is Lieutenant Mitchell," the senior chief continued. It wasn't a question. "We served with his father in Kandahar. Staff Sergeant David Mitchell was killed saving 6 of our men during an IED attack." The guards stepped back instinctively. One of them opened his mouth to speak, but the senior chief's gaze silenced him without a word being spoken. "Mrs. Mitchell," another SEAL said, his voice thick with emotion, "your husband pulled me out of that burning vehicle. I wouldn't be here without him. Dave talked about you and Tyler every day," added a third. "Showed us pictures. Told us about the nurse who worked double shifts so their boy could have a better life." The senior chief turned to face the guards, his expression stone-cold professional. "This woman's husband died serving his country. Her son is about to receive his commission as a naval officer. And you thought it appropriate to remove her from his graduation ceremony?" The first guard's face had gone pale. There was a complaint about seating." "From whom?" The senior chief's voice could have cut steel. The guard looked around desperately, as if seeking support that was no longer there. The families who had whispered and stared were now watching from the gymnasium doorway, their earlier smugness replaced by shame. "Mrs. Mitchell," the senior chief said, turning back to Sarah with visible respect, "would you do us the honor of allowing us to escort you back to your seat? Your son is about to receive his bars, and his mother should be there to see it." Sarah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The SEALs formed an honor guard around her, their presence parting the crowd that had gathered in the doorway. As they walked back into the gymnasium, the entire room fell silent. The senior chief's voice carried across the space. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mrs. Sarah Mitchell. Her husband, Staff Sergeant David Mitchell, gave his life for his country. Her son is graduating today because of her sacrifice and dedication. She has earned her place here more than most." The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, a few people began to stand. The applause started small but grew, spreading through the gymnasium like a wave. Not the polite clapping of ceremony, but something deeper. Recognition, respect, and perhaps a touch of shame for what they had witnessed. Sarah took her seat in the 3rd row, surrounded by the 10 SEALs who had turned her Exile into an honor guard. The metal of her son's baby bracelet felt warm against her wrist as she prepared to watch him receive his commission. If you believe dignity always finds its voice, even in silence, subscribe now. It's how we remember what must never be forgotten. Lieutenant Tyler Mitchell stepped forward to receive his gold bars, but his eyes were fixed on his mother in the 3rd row. The SEALs sat at attention around her, their presence transforming what had been a moment of humiliation into something approaching ceremony. As the commanding officer pinned the lieutenant's bars on Tyler's uniform, Sarah rose slowly from her seat. The SEALs rose with her, their movements synchronized and respectful. The entire gymnasium followed suit, hundreds of people standing as one. Sarah reached into her purse and withdrew her husband's flag, the same one she had held in secret moments before. This time, she held it openly, pressing it against her heart as she watched her son officially become an officer in the United States Navy. The senior chief noticed her gesture and nodded to his men. In perfect unison, the 10 SEALs rendered a slow, precise salute, not to the new lieutenant, but to the flag his mother held and the man it represented. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the room. This was more than a graduation ceremony. It had become a moment of recognition for a family's sacrifice that spanned generations. The afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed to focus on Sarah and the faded flag, illuminating both with an almost ethereal glow. Tyler completed his oath of office, his voice strong and clear as it carried across the silent gymnasium. When he finished, he looked directly at his mother and rendered his first salute as an officer, not to his commanding officer, but to the woman who had made his achievement possible. The SEALs lowered their salute in perfect formation. The rest of the audience remained standing, many with tears in their eyes. The 2 security guards had disappeared entirely. Their earlier authority evaporated in the face of true honor. Sarah carefully folded her husband's flag and returned it to her purse. The gesture was witnessed by everyone, but it belonged to her family, past, present, and future. The scent of floor wax and nervous anticipation had been replaced by something indefinable but unmistakable, the presence of dignity restored. As the ceremony concluded, family members approached Sarah with quiet apologies and genuine respect. The woman in pearls introduced herself properly. The man in the expensive suit shook her hand and thanked her for her family's service. Their earlier whispers of judgment had transformed into words of admiration. The senior chief approached Sarah one final time. "Mrs. Mitchell, your husband would be proud of you both today. And ma'am, you never have to stand alone. The brotherhood extends to the families who serve alongside us." Sarah nodded, finally allowing herself to smile. The cold hallway, the scratched window, the janitor's closet, they had all become part of a story that ended not with humiliation, but with honor restored and dignity recognized. Some truths don't need microphones, and sometimes 10 quiet warriors can change a room without saying a word. If you typed honor earlier, thank you. If you subscribed, welcome. And if this story moved you, we stand together, even in silence.